They said I joke too much, that I don't fit the mold. But last time I checked, I'm the one still bold.
Welcome to another episode of the Heart and Hustle podcast. I'm your host, Omer Hargrove, and today we're going to talk about the moment that most people regret. And there's a particular moment that we can all remember, a moment where after a conflict and you realize, oh, that didn't come out the way I intended. You've replayed it in your head and maybe you wish you could rewind the conversation and you know what you meant to say, but what you actually said, what came out felt way sharper, heavier, and more intense than the situation seemed to call for. And usually the most confusing part of this is that the trigger itself might have felt small. Maybe it was a comment, a tone, missed expectation, something that on its own shouldn't have caused that much of a reaction. Or maybe you feel like you're on the other side of it and you felt like what you said didn't deserve that kind of response. Man, they blew up after I said this or after we brought up that. So today I want to talk about those kinds of moments, not to shame these moments, but for us to understand them. We're not trying to justify them, just understand them, because explosive conflict doesn't come from nowhere. And when we understand that it does come from somewhere, we can start interpreting the pattern before it damages the relationships that we care about most. So let's start by talking about why it feels like it came out of nowhere. One of the most common things people say after this kind of explosion is something like, I don't know why I reacted like that. And usually they mean it. They don't know why they came out like that. It's not that they're being dishonest. They're genuinely confused about the intensity of their own response. But explosive conflict almost never starts in the moment that it shows up. What we see as the explosion is usually just the final release of something that's been building quietly over time. And it's the visible moment of something that's been invisible for quite some time. When a conflict is delayed, when conflict is ignored or minimized, it doesn't disappear. It just gets this retroactive return on investment. It is stored and it stores those emotions and they do not stay neutral. It gains weight over time and it gains meaning. It starts attaching itself to these kinds of future moments. So when something finally triggers the response where the hatch opens, it isn't just reacting to what's happening right now. It's reacting to everything that's been carried silently up to this point, everything that you've been throwing in this little hatch. And that's why that reaction feels disproportionate, because it's cumulative. It's been building up over time. And so most people who explode in conflict don't see themselves as necessarily reactive people. In fact, many of them pride themselves on being patient. And that word right there, they're like, oh, I'm a patient person. I think that sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when we say that we're patient, sometimes it means that we've been letting things go. We've been giving people the benefit of the doubt. We've been telling ourselves it's not worth bringing up. And in many cases, it's, yes, your patience. The patience is real. The intention is good. The desire to maintain peace, that's sincere. But patience without honesty doesn't stay patient forever. And every time that you dismiss something that mattered to you, it doesn't just vanish. It compresses and it gets pushed down, layered under the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, until what you're carrying is so much heavier than the original issue ever was. And at that point, you're not responding from clarity anymore. Your patience, you used it all in the beginning, okay? And now that patience has run out and you're responding from pressure now. And pressure always looks for a moment to release. And while everything looks calm on the outside, something very different is happening internally when we keep holding back what we really want to say. Let me be specific. Not saying what's on my mind, but maybe more so what's on my heart. You start replaying conversations in your head, and you were patient and you held back, but now you're imagining what you should have said, and you notice patterns start forming, like they always do this. They never think about me. And you start becoming more sensitive to those behaviors that once maybe at the beginning felt minor. And you're still functioning, you're still showing up, but emotionally you're now keeping score. And this internal processing is really exhausting on a person. It's rarely shared with the other person. And so when the conflict finally surfaces and it all comes up, everything that you've been harboring, it feels sudden. Like, whoa, where did this come from? And even though it's been forming in you for a long time, to them, it's like, what are you talking about? I just said this. And that kind of disconnect is one of the reasons that explosive conflict feels so disorienting for everyone involved. And in the moment of an explosion, there's often a sense of relief, like, yeah, I got it all out finally. You finally said what you've been holding on to. You finally stopped filtering yourself, and you finally I'm just going to let them know how it is. I let the truth out. And in one sense, yeah, that honesty is real. The feelings didn't come from nowhere. It's not like you just fabricated this idea of being frustrated. Your hurt is most likely legitimate. But honesty and effectiveness are not necessarily the same thing. See, it's not as much as what I say, but how I say it. To think that explosive conflict doesn't allow for discernment. It doesn't ask what needs to be said right now. It asks, what do I need to get off my chest? It's a big difference. That's what I mean when I say I want to share a piece of my mind instead of I want to share my heart. Everything comes when we let this kind of explosive conflict control us. Everything comes out at once. Concerns, emotions, interpretations, assumptions, all carrying this different weight. And that tone sharpens, our language intensifies, and the other person's nervous system goes into defense mode. And at that point, even valid truths can be hard to receive. So what ends up happening is you may finally explode, get everything out, but is it received? Most likely not. Is a relationship better because of it? Most likely not. There's most likely a big disorientation in the relationship to where there's probably a moment where you don't even know where either one of you stand. And it goes to this idea that what I said, it's not what you say, but how you say it. And if we were able to, in the moment that we were first needed to say something, but we slapped on patience and said, I'm just a patient person, I'm going to let it go. And now, months later, years later, we blow up. I want us to look at what did it really mean when we said, well, I'm just patient, I'm letting it go. What we're really doing is we're siphoning off conflict. And for us to really think about this, would it have been easier in how I said what I wanted to say 3 months ago, a year ago, when I was still patient? Could it have been received better if I didn't explode and said it in a way that was articulate and calm instead of this I forgot the word I was going to use, but in this crazy way. See, after an explosion, this regret shows up, and it's not regret for caring, but regret for how it was expressed. And when we replay those kinds of conversations, we often wish that we had said it differently. And you feel this weight, realizing that you can't take it back. And on the other side, the person receiving it is going to feel blindsided. They may feel attacked rather than invited into understanding, and they're not going to see your side the way that you most likely want them to, because it's coming off so hysterical. And even if they do recognize that there's truth to what's said, the delivery still makes it hard to trust this process that we made. And this is where the damage happens. Explosive conflict often undermines our credibility, not because the message is necessarily wrong, but because the delivery is unsafe. And safety matters deeply in any relationship that's meant to last. That's whether it's workplace, romantic, etc. Like trust and that feeling of safety really matters. And one of the most dangerous parts of this kind of pattern is how often it repeats. After an explosion, there's usually remorse, maybe repair, maybe resolve, and maybe you tell yourself like, well, this was just an anomaly. It's just because this person they said things over the years and I finally just couldn't take it anymore. And you see how we often put the blame on the other person? It's because they kept walking all over me. Well, they probably didn't even know they were walking over you. And if we were to just learn how to handle conflict when it deserves to be brought up, like in the moment of, then we're not going to be blowing up over and over. See, we like to blame, it's just this person, it's just that person. And yet it happens repeatedly. There's this pattern to where there's this, I guess, this certain type of person, right, that just keeps getting under our skin, and we hold it down, then we burst. And I want us to consider that you even though we tell ourselves it's just a one-time thing, we don't really change how we're handling these conflicts. It's not like there's just only one type of this person in the world. But without changing these kinds of habits of delay, this cycle is just going to restart. That silence is going to build, the pressure is going to accumulate, release is going to happen somehow or some way, and then regret typically follows. Breaking the cycle isn't about suppressing our emotion. It's about changing when and how honesty happens. And one of the most important shifts in handling conflict well is learning to address things earlier. Earlier doesn't mean aggressively. Earlier doesn't mean emotionally. Earlier doesn't mean perfectly. It means that while the issue is still relatively small or recent, while curiosity is still present, while the relationship still feels safe enough to hold tension, healthy conflict rarely feels dramatic. It's often quiet, uncomfortable, and direct. It doesn't rely on intensity to be taken seriously. And when honesty happens earlier like this, it doesn't need an explosion to feel heard. And part of maturity is learning to notice your own internal signals before things escalate. You know, we're all different. We all have different kinds of personalities, but when you can just start being self-aware and understanding, like, okay, I find myself replaying this conversation over and over, or you're noticing that you feel less and less patient with this person, or when you feel like small things start to feel heavier than they should, those are not signs that you're failing as a person. They're signaling that something needs attention. And explosions don't come unannounced. They send these types of warnings long before they arrive. And handling conflict well doesn't mean eliminating these emotions. It means giving emotions appropriate space before it turns combustible. And it means choosing clarity over this explosion, this release. It means naming concerns while you still care how they land. And it means trusting that early honesty is kinder than delayed intensity. Explosive honesty may feel relieving in the moment, but timely honesty is what really builds trust. And so if you've ever been surprised at yourself with how strongly you reacted in a moment of conflict, I want to just say this clearly. That reaction didn't come from nowhere. It came from things that mattered and probably were never addressed. The goal isn't to suppress our emotions. The goal is to stop storing our emotions. And I want us to just consider everything that we talked about and just know that all of this is in my new book, Handling Conflict. But we'll continue to go into more things about handling conflict. And maybe next week we'll even talk about control and why managing conflict tightly can also prevent real connection. But until next time, have a great life.
Then tell me why you still watch every move I take. You call me phony, nah, I'm just free. And if you still doubt me, go by my book.